All right, we are live. It is Thursday, February 17th, and this is our weekly developer check-in meeting. Before we get started on the agenda, let's go around the room and do some quick introductions. My name is Jen Lampton. I'm joining from Oakland, California, and I have nothing exciting to share. Greg, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Greg. I'm joining from Greece. I'm generally interested in anything related to Backdrop. I've been doing a little bit of work with regards to form validation, working on different issues around working my way towards inline form errors. Yeah, and trying to do code reviewing of other people's work and progress the queue as much as I can. Robert?
I'm Robert Lang, web folder on the internet, coming to you from Altadena, California. And lately, I've been working on documentation and form validations and little tag teaming with Greg. Pass it to Tim.
Hi, I'm Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim. I'm in Deerwood, Minnesota. And yeah, I've kind of been working on a contrib module, helping a colleague port a contrib module that has to do with blocks. And I'm learning a lot about blocks in background. And that's cool. Joseph, did you go yet?
Nope. Hi, I'm Joseph. I'm a backend developer from Las Vegas, Nevada. And yeah, I think everyone's gone. Okay.
You're muted.
Thanks, everyone. I realized I was muted. Let's see. This week we had a handful of new contributed projects that came out. I don't know who's been busy, but there are a ton of new projects, including Use Photo Grid, Pack and Upload, Active Tags, Title Length, Advanced Text Formatter, and IP Anonymize all came out in the last week. So thank you, whoever's been working on those. I also have been seeing a ton of new contrib projects getting created. So even if they don't have stable releases right now, there's a whole bunch of activity going on in contrib. So that's exciting. From the forum this week, there were a couple of issues posted that would like to be discussed. I'd like to start with this first one because I think it'll be the easiest to get a resolution on. But it looks like we had originally decided to put our telemetry policy on the privacy page on backdropcms.org, but I'm not sure if it got updated or not.
Oh, Jen, let me. Here's
Do you
the
want
status.
to? Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah. What happened? We talked about that in some dev meetings, and just like where should we put it, and decided on the privacy policy page. We thought made sense, but then I went to the privacy policy page, and I realized it said like approved by the PMC on a certain date or something. And I thought, well, wait a second. This looks like it's an official document, and I don't know if I can just add stuff to it. So we did approve a privacy, or we did approve a telemetry policy. So I actually think there's a link in core that links to the privacy page. So that would be the best place to put it if you think that's okay. And I just wanted approval from somebody else before I did anything. I had assumed it was less formal than that. And then when I looked at it, it's like, no, this looks like an official policy.
What part of the page was it that made you think it was official policy?
I'm going there right now. Sorry.
Under information.
Doesn't it have a statement that says like right at the top that's like effective starting May 25th? That line right at the top, that makes it look like as of May 25th, we decided this was our policy. And now if I change this page, I don't know if I'm changing something. So I could be totally overreading, reading too much into that.
Yeah, I don't think that's what the effective line means, but it wouldn't hurt to check the PMCQ and see if there was a specific discussion around the privacy policy. I have vague memories of that being reviewed and edited there, and then posted, I think in response to somebody saying, what's your privacy policy? And us going, oh, we need to fix that, and then iterating on it. So that's probably why that date went in, is because I bet we changed the page on that date to include everything the PMC had voted on. I don't know if that means we need to go through that formal process again, but it would be good to at least post something in the PMC queue saying, we're making this addition as we'd agreed when we started telemetry, here's what it is, and allow room for conversation around that. But I do think that since we have new telemetry stuff happening, it would be good to get something out sooner rather than later. And we should revise and approve if whatever we put up there isn't immediately accepted by everyone.
Okay, yeah, the intent was to have that posted by the launch, which was a month ago. So
Yeah.
I will try to follow through on that. And as you said, we'll check the PMC queue, update the PMC, probably go ahead and make the change. And then if we need to make further changes, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so next item, there's an issue in the core queue, issue number 933. It's been around for a while, about changing the node title into a proper field. So rather than having it be a special attribute for an entity that displays in strange ways in template files, gets a bunch of special handling, to convert it to behave more like everything else, the way all the other fields behave. This is something, there's been a contrib module for this in Drupal for a long time for people who want their titles to be more reasonable. I think Display Suite included some things that turned the title into a normal field. I think Drupal 8 got most of the same field-like behavior onto titles, 8 and beyond. So it's something that there's strong demand for. And so I don't know where this issue is now. I don't know if anyone else has seen it more recently than I have. I'll just go take a look.
Just a clarification. This is just making it act like a field in the field UI, not moving it out of the node table data-wise. Correct?
I don't know. So I think the original request was just to remove the title and add a field instead, like sort of convert it to being a field. But my major concern is that that's going to require a lot of API changes. It's going to break a lot of contrib projects that are expecting things to be where they are. It's going to break, there's just a lot of stuff like template files. Okay. I'll assume the titles especially. So my recommendation is that we change the user interface to more match where people expect to find field settings. So move the title from the section on the configure form to the manage fields page, and see if we can clean up as much as we can in the user experience area without actually changing the way the title works. But I'm not sure that that's going to get us close enough to title being a field, because you're still not going to get all of the same settings you would get for a field. And so I think for Backdrop 2, that might be something we can consider, where we can sort of prepare people ahead of time and be like, hey, all of your template files are going to need to be, rewritten to remove the H2 tag or whatever. But yeah, I don't know why it was requested that we talk about this issue today. Let me see if I can.
I think it was me.
Okay.
And here's the context, which is the node or the pathless node issue. Olaf would like to be able to display nodes with the image above the title. So the behavior he's looking for, now that doesn't mean that he wouldn't like more, I don't know. But the behavior he would like is just simply to be able to put the title below the image on a node. And he kind of considers that a blocker for this issue. And I was sensing in the issue queue that there was sort of momentum between we can't do this in 1.x. And I just wanted to throw it on the agenda, because sometimes when we talk about it in a meeting, we suddenly find things that in the issue queue we don't. So I just wanted at least one chance here to see, is there a way we can at least accomplish our short-term goals? Or is this really a 2x thing that we can?
Yeah, so being able to drag and drop a field in the order of other fields, that is how you control the content of the node. It has nothing to do with where the title appears outside a div with all of the content in it. And so that's the thing that will break the template files if we were to introduce it. Now, that's what makes me nervous. That doesn't mean it's not possible. There is probably a way that we could handle via pre-processing some special logic around title handling that could detect if the title was in the content area and not display the title tag. You know, we aren't going to know what we're going to be facing with people who have custom themes who've like hard coded the H2 tag, regardless of whether there's a title there or not. But we do know that in core template files, there's a check to see if it's on the page or not before the title is printed. We could leverage that somehow in pre-process and set that flag to indicate something other than whether it's the main page or not to make the title show or hide. So I think if we looked into it technically, there might be a way that we could introduce that kind of functionality in 1.x that was backwards compatible, but it just sets off a whole bunch of like red flags for me that it's going to be really complicated. And if we could just push that part of it to Backdrop 2, we would save ourselves a lot of time and frustration and hopefully be able to do it with less breakage for pre-existing sites. It could also be something where there's like a user interface setting that's like, if you've installed Backdrop before 1.22, you don't see this feature, and then you can't break your current site. And then if you install the new version, you would get the option to be like, use my template the way it normally was, or use it the new way. So there's definitely, it's possible. I think it is possible to do this in 1.x. The question is there enough demand for it to do it now?
Well, and is it necessary that it's in core? Is there currently a contrib solution, or could there be? Did Drupal 7 display suites did this, right? Joseph, does display suites for Backdrop do this yet? Or
Yes,
there's also a title field module.
Title. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
And I think it's ported. Just let me find it.
Okay.
Oh, but no. Okay, that doesn't solve the problem for our core issue. Okay. I for a minute there, I was thinking we were talking backdrop.org, and look, well, we could have just installed a contrib, but this isn't about backdrop.org. This is about a core layout profile. So we would, okay.
But
Right.
one thing
I think
that could be
we can work around this. Go ahead.
For core could be to take the contrib title module and throw it in core. Right. So I mean, I'm not sure that's the best solution, but it's an option, right? Because we know this exists in contrib. We could say, hey, if you want this functionality, this is now in core, turn it on. And then if you don't have title module on, nothing changes for you. And if you do, you get the new out-of-box functionality.
Does that module work by overriding the default template?
I don't know.
That's how Display Suite gets around this, is it just overrides all the node templates.
Yeah.
I don't see any templates defined.
Okay.
I'll give you a link to that module. I'll put a link.
It might also just be like, I'm a module, you do your own thing in your template files and leaves the H2 tags there, even if you have your title set to display in the content area.
I don't know if this is actually a blocker. I think Olaf just believes that sort of the standard practice in these blocks that we want to put on the front page would be to have the title and then the image and then the title underneath it. But that doesn't have to be that way. We could have the title above, it just won't look as good.
We could also think about other ways to solve that problem, right? Like this is the specific node type that we're using for placing items. We could provide a template file that overrided the way a node displayed for that individual template. So if we had like block, or I don't know what we call it, card, teaser, TPL, PHP, or whatever view mode we're using, in that one template, we could pull out the title and put it into the content area below where the image is. And we can even remove the tag, because there's like a semantic markup that's created around the way we assume blog posts are written, where the title is outside and then we have like a footer section and then we have content, and that helps people navigate that area properly. But if it's a card, we don't have that same semantic structure. And so we probably remove the content div. We could put stuff in whatever order we wanted in that template file. So I think there are other solutions to do that Olaf is right, are not maybe the standard way of doing it. If you had a user interface, you'd have more control over that. But we could get the result he wants in a way that leverages what's in core today.
Right, this was really helpful for me. I'll point Olaf at this discussion. Hopefully he can watch it later.
It might also be helpful to show like a couple of alternative pull requests for that too. Just like here's a super straightforward example of like what a template file would look like. And then you can try it in the sandbox and see if that user experience feels really wonky or not. Because sometimes if your field UI order doesn't affect what you see in the template file, that can be really confusing for people. So yeah, there is some usability considerations too when you start making things a little too custom in the theme layer.
Yeah, I think we have some issues to implement more of the like field layout features from Display Suite in core so that we can kind of get around this.
Yeah, that would be helpful too.
Well, Doc Wilmot said he's looking for a project, so.
That would be quite the project.
It's right up his alley though, taking on the big ones.
Yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully Olaf will get to watch this and this video, and it'll help answer some of his questions. But I don't think it's necessarily a blocker. I think it is important to consider, but there might be other solutions. And then the next issue, this is something where IndigoZilla requested core committer feedback, so it's perfect timing that Peter has arrived. I don't know if you have thoughts on this, Peter, but this is, let's see, specifically around file access functions. So this is number 5480 in the core queue. So I'll just read this. I haven't followed this yet, but it says, I'd love to get some core committers following the regarding the direction. There is some guessing as to why file access has an optional file parameter. Node does not have one. Should it be optional? A string or an object, but not null. If it should be optional, how detailed should possible checks be? Some permissions require a file entity in place, some do not. Or does checking without an actual file make things too complicated? Is the overall direction of the pull request okay? Currently, we strive to make file access the main function, file access a wrapper, so file underscore access a wrapper, and file underscore access to fully cover all operations in the hook. So I don't know if any core developers have reviewed that issue yet, but it looks like we need a code review on the current approach to make sure that it makes sense for the solution. I'm just going to take a look at the issue, see if there's an easy summary here.
I think that Herb posted some comment.
Okay.
A comment to that issue. I have to look. What was the issue number again?
Issue number 5480. So file is an entity type in Backdrop as it was in file entity in Drupal 7 and as it is in Drupal 8 and beyond. But file permissions are a little bit different than other types of content because in addition to having access to view the thing, when you view a file, you also are like, you might be viewing the file entity, but you also may be trying to actually view the document that's attached to it. And so there's sort of two levels of viewing going on there. And I don't remember exactly how we got to where we are today with what file view behaves. I remember only the very beginning of that process. I think Greg and IndigoZilla and I were having a conversation about it. And I'm like, that's not how it works. And they're both like, yes, it is. And I'm like, well, I obviously have no idea what's even going on with this anymore. So there is some complexity around file viewing. There's also some complexity around the access checking. I know in Drupal, there's also a bunch of concern about like, you know, what happens if you don't have access to view a thing, like a file.
Yeah, it's not only complexity, it's also inconsistencies between the respective underscore types. Access. Yeah.
Yeah. And the methods on the entity itself and the wrapper functions that are emulating previous Drupal behavior, it's all a little inconsistent.
So I mentioned that this is out of my depth, and RG Piano and IndigoZilla have been going back and forth and doing an awesome job. At some point, Herb added a comment, but it was just a generic comment. And then I think that to help with the discussion, to facilitate the discussion, they moved specific comments. By they, I mean IndigoZilla and RG Piano moved the comments into the PR, and they're waiting for feedback there on specific items.
Okay.
But I didn't see any core committer actually commenting on the PR. So yeah.
Okay. So Peter, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that or if you're willing to share them now, but if not, you're welcome to review that issue if and when you are able.
I haven't heard anything about this issue as yet, so I'd have to go and
Okay.
look through and read through it, I guess.
Okay.
Cool.
And then that's it for issues that were posted in the forum. Actually, there was one more about alternative database support that sounds like it's been answered. Somebody was just asking if we were planning on supporting databases other than MySQL, and we mentioned that Silkscreen CMS has alternative database support in it. So in short, no, not on our to-do list, but people who are using it. So.
Yeah, we need, this turned out, we sort of like flagged that issue as a documentation problem.
Yeah.
Because it was most likely that the documentation page that we had was a copy paste. So it's remnants of D7. So I think that it's good if we updated it, removed the bits that are not applicable anymore, and then also provided a link to Silkscreen and mentioned that it's a drop-in replacement that follows the changes in the main Backdrop
Yeah, that's a great
project,
great
and that's it. Yeah, yeah. And I think that the person that was testing things mentioned that they grabbed one of the modules in contrib land for Silkscreen and they put it in Backdrop and it was working out of the box for them. I was surprised that this happened because I think that we removed everything that had to do with database abstraction. So I was expecting that it wouldn't work because it needed things that Silkscreen only does. Yes, Joseph, please go ahead.
A lot of our abstractions, that one in particular, and also the one for field backends, like we say we've removed them, but kind of we've just like turned off how they're exposed to the outside, and internally they still use them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they're all there. It was a lot of work to rewrite everything. So we just said, nope, MySQL only.
Yeah, and then the other suggestion, now that I have this new input, the other suggestion that was made, I can't remember if it was by the same person or Herb that chimed in, was that if we could move that project from Silkscreen's contrib to our contrib, but I don't know if it's, yeah, I have to test.
Are we going to fork a part
project?
of Silkscreen?
Which project is this?
Like
I'll
alternative
find
field storage or something like that, like a
Postgres, the Postgres thing. Just let me find the issue. It's mentioned in the.
Yeah, I think if he's using a module to just turn back on the database abstraction, then like that would just work.
So if you basically, yes, so if you look at the last comment by Indigozella on issue 5510, there's a link there to Silkscreen CMS-contrib, and it's the database _ PGS SQL.
Yeah.
Which
I think
is the issue number? Oh, never mind.
5510, yes. And it's nice that, yeah, because basically looking at the .info file of that project, it specifies a type equals driver, which is not supported by Backdrop. So my understanding was that it was going to require Silkscreen, but yeah, maybe it does work.
I am not sure about that. I think, well, did we ever remove that? I mean, you can put all kinds of things in your type and Drupal will just kind of do stuff with them. Like we also support alternate theme engines, even though one has never been built.
Yeah. So it might be that core is not doing anything with it, but that module might be doing something with it.
Who knows?
Even there's other entries in those info file like database_driver and database_backend, which point to other .inc files. Okay.
Yeah, I think those were the files that were removed from Backdrop when it was early, and so they're just like, we're just gonna put these back and then turn it on.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think from a code perspective, there's no problem with just leaving it like that. The big problem really is that Postgres and MySQL do not implement the SQL spec the same way. And so it's very easy to end up in a situation where you have queries that only work in one database.
Yeah, and because the majority of contrib modules are only ever run on MySQL, you're going to run into problems where people have never tested anything on Postgres and they're not going to have noticed things. And then even if they were like fixes submitted for it, they might never get merged because no one else can ever test them. So it's a bit of a, like, it might work, but you might be on your own in terms of fixing problems when it doesn't. So let's see. So just for getting to the end of the hour here, this Wednesday we had a security release. We released Backdrop version 121.2, and that came out in conjunction with a release of Drupal at the same time. Drupal's release in Backdrop's Drupal 7's and Backdrop's change were exactly the same. It was one line change, very minimal. Drupal 8 I think also had or Drupal 9 had a quick edit update also. We did, thanks to Tim and Peter for doing the research on it, find out about CVE, so a security advisory notice publicly that had been posted about a vulnerability in Backdrop that nobody had notified Backdrop about, which is usually very unusual. Sometimes when you request a CVE, there's a section in there that requires that you have notified the software project about the vulnerability before they create a public notice about it. And whoever discovered this vulnerability did not actually notify our project about it. And yet somehow the organization that releases these released the details on it anyway. And so our plan is to do another security release next Wednesday that resolves that issue. So we're sort of in a hurry to get it out just because it's out there and there's a website. People are selling exploits for $5,000 a piece. So it would be good to get that whole plugged up as fast as possible. So we should plan on another security release coming out next Wednesday for Backdrop. And then I don't have any specific updates for 122. Just checking the milestone here. It looks like we currently have 4 issues. We talked a little bit about hiding the hidden path content typing core. That was where the title field issue was relevant. And it looks like Greg is working on the custom validation errors for required fields. That's a blocker for the inline form errors. I think that we're
Not
working towards.
blocker, but yeah, I'll call it
related.
a prequel, or not a, yeah.
Okay. And then trim summary on word boundary. Peter, is this your issue? This is a good one.
Yeah, but I'm probably gonna drop off as advocate for that because I don't think it's going anywhere yet.
Okay. Okay. So it looks like we don't have any other updates for 122, which is good because we've only got 3 minutes left. So is there anything anyone wants to talk about today that wasn't on the list? Go ahead, Greg.
So I've got 2 issues, 5503 and 5504, that are related. And if I knew, maybe it's better that they split. If I knew that they're both going to attach the vertical tabs.js file, would have merged those 2, but I don't mind dealing with them separately. One of them aims to put indicators in vertical tabs and field sets, just to show that there's required fields within them, just to give an indication. And then 5504 aims to automatically switch to the first tab with the first required field that has not required, but first field that has not validated. So far, I still need to tweak it. Thanks for the feedback, Robert. But even if I fix the small issue that Robert mentioned, how it works is if there's multiple tabs that have fields that fail validation, how it works is the person will, from a user experience point of view, the person would click the submit button and they would get a summary of all the validation errors at the top. Some of them might be visible fields in the rest of the form. Some of the fields would be in the vertical tabs, so they might fix one of them. The one
So
that
before we get into the technical details here, we should not be fixing either of these things in core. The problem is there should never be a required field in a vertical tab. The whole point of a vertical tab means that you can ignore everything in that tab and hit save and nothing will happen. If there is a required field in a vertical tab, it needs to have a default value. So the solution to this problem is to find the required field and make sure it has a default value in it so that you never have to, like, we can't throw any validation errors on anything in a vertical tab unless it's the error that's wrong. So I know you'd mentioned this the other day, that we should solve this for field sets. And I think that makes a lot of sense. But I think, like, even talking about like we shouldn't be adding any kind of stuff for vertical tabs, because that's not a use case that should ever exist in Backdrop. And so we should remove the use case rather than trying to fix something that shouldn't be there in the first place.
Okay, I generally agree, but if you go into specifics, so first of all, I'm trying to in generally prevent people from shooting themselves on the foot and making bad decisions affect the user experience. So these additions, I think that they do help core, because it would, if a contrib module does make bad decisions, it won't affect the user experience, or it would help the user experience. But then the other thing is,
the user experience should be, if somebody builds something that it doesn't work the way it's supposed to work, there should be like a warning there that says, hey, if you're going to put a required field in a vertical tab, it needs to have a default value. And then we never have to worry about this scenario happening because they're using it properly. Like, I don't think we should be adding a bunch of extra code that is never going to be used. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, sure. But sorry, just last one thing, and then I'll allow you to say your thing. So one of the things that triggered this whole thing is that an issue that Peter was working on, where it adds a feature where you make the revision log field required. What would be the default value there?
This page was edited on X date. Something like that. Doesn't matter. Whatever you want, whatever you put in your configuration form. It's just, if you're going to make that field required, then on the configuration form where it says default value for this field, that field is also required. And you can never get into a scenario where there's never a message in that box.
Yeah, I'll allow. We get into a situation where the default value doesn't provide any value, or it defeats the purpose of making the field required. It was meant
then it
to
doesn't
force.
go in a vertical tab. Like the whole point of a vertical tab is that ignore this. If you have a required field that needs to have a new value in it, it gets moved outside the vertical tabs and sits above them. And it's like, you can't ignore this. It's on the form now. You have to see it. Because you can't hide something that's important. Like, and the whole point of vertical tab is to hide it, to like decrease the impact of a form that could have 100 fields on it, right? So that's the user experience improvement, is like, hide the things that don't matter. But if you take something that matters and you put it where the things that don't matter are and hide it, that's like that. You've broken down the whole point of having that tool in there anyway.
I think, yeah. All right, cool. Let's let Joseph say what you wanted to say, and then Robert, you can go.
Do we have this documented somewhere, such as the W3C spec?
Well, vertical tabs are a weird custom Drupalism, but I do think that they're documented in the style guide. Let me see if I can find it. There, I know there's a bunch of Drupal usability information documentation. I don't know that got translated to Backdrop anywhere, but let me check this out.
Because I never assume anything in the form is optional unless I know that it's not, or is less important.
Well, I know what Jen is talking about. There's a document somewhere in d.org. Maybe we copied it over in our thing, which says this element, when to use it, when not to use it. That's what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I know. I'll try to find it. but yeah, it's documented somewhere. I'm not sure if it's in our documentation, but yeah. Robert, what do you want to say?
Yeah, so I think the difference between whether you fill in a required field or leave a required field blank, or you put in something that's incorrect, I mean, that won't validate, is kind of blurry. And so even if we don't put required fields in vertical tabs, we can still have fields in vertical tabs that need validation.
Yeah.
And if we fail to validate, then we still ought to highlight the first vertical tab that fails validation, which is part of, I think, what Craig was working on.
Yes.
So
I
can you
say there are definitely modules in the wild
that don't understand the user experience.
That didn't listen to the style guide.
Yeah. Or
so, you know, one I know of for sure is UberCart. That if you do a clean install of UberCart, and then you go to one of the settings pages that has a bunch of vertical tabs, and some of those are blank, and you try to save, and it will complain at you about several of them. And so this validation and selecting the tab that is failing would be really useful.
Yeah, so, I think so. Module filter does this too. Is people just like, they're like, oh, here's a tool, I'm going to use it for completely the wrong thing. I feel like UberCart should have its own validation for that, though. Like, that doesn't seem like a core's problem, but they're misusing a core feature. I would like to know if there's a use case for just on core alone. Like, if we can create a like node form or something that has this scenario where we're not depending on somebody having done something wrong. Like, I am just going to brainstorm here and see if I can come up with something. But like, okay, so of the vertical tabs, we have like a schedule date in one of them. We have like authoring information. So if you had happened to like choose a date in the past to schedule to, I don't know if that throws a validation error, but let's just pretend it does. And then you had clicked to the next tab, and then you had like tried to change the author name to like a username that didn't exist in your system. Is that a scenario where you can be triggering validation failure on two vertical tabs at the same time? Like, can we? Okay, so if we can come, if we can.
That was a use case I posted on Greg's.
Okay. Were you
Joseph,
say something, Joseph?
You wanted to say something?
What is the correct option for a required field on a long form? Is it just to not use any form control structures?
You can use anything as long as it's not a vertical tab.
I don't understand what the difference is between a vertical tab and an accordion or a field set.
So a vertical tab tells to the person on the page, everything in here can be safely ignored.
I have never heard that from anyone on the internet except you.
It was invented specifically for Drupal. It was a solution to Drupal 6 usability studies when they looked at the node form that was like 9,000 miles long, and they're like, how do we make this less overwhelming to people? And they did a bunch of studies, and they realized that if you could move things that were safely ignorable to a place where people didn't have to see them, it made using the node form less unpleasant for everyone. So and this is documented somewhere, like Greg, there's something that's like explains
I'll find the link.
The common design patterns that exist within Drupal and what they're intended for and when you should use them and when you shouldn't. And it's very common in Drupal that module developers see a pattern in some place and go, oh, I'll just use that and apply it everywhere without understanding the intent of the design pattern. And that's how you end up with a system like Drupal that is very unintuitive and hard for people to understand, and editors get super frustrated with. And so
Team beat me to it.
Yeah.
And user interface standards, yes, that's it.
Yeah. And so when we first started with Backdrop, we had big goals to create something. Apple has something like this too, called a user interaction guide or something like this. I forget. It was on our design meeting agenda for like 2 years, and we had someone volunteer to make it, and they started and then they disappeared, and so it didn't get anywhere. But it was essentially going to be this document that Greg is talking about for developers of Backdrop to be like, when do I use a vertical tab? When do I use an accordion? When do I use a field set? When do I use I don't know, autocomplete, whatever the heck date picker, and it would have all of that same information in it for people who are building interfaces. So the backdrop would have one cohesive experience rather than being like Drupal, where on any given page you don't know what any of the design patterns tell you as a user.
Yeah. Having said that, and I think Peter should go next because he has these hand raised. That document doesn't have any reference for required fields, and it doesn't say don't do it. It says recommendations. But yeah, anyways, it seems that we're enforcing instead of recommending. Peter?
I'm with Joseph in that I've never heard any of this before, and I think it's all very well pointing to a document on Drupal, but if we don't have a document for Backdrop, that doesn't really mean anything. Secondly, that's a document for people developing these fields or developing these forms, but if the people using these forms don't know that, hey, this stuff can be ignored, what's the point? I mean, those people may eventually become developers themselves and then know that, and they're never going to read this stuff. So one, I think we've got a documentation problem, and two, I think this needs to be very much more put out there because I've never heard of it. And if we're having these problems because people don't know about this, then that's an issue.
Yeah, I mean, so part of it is that like, if you have a good design, the end user will never know these things, right? They'll just use it enough that they've learned that they never need to look at the vertical tabs. And if you have something like Drupal where somebody starts to make that assumption and then they install UberCart and all of the assumptions they've made about how to interact with the page are no longer correct, that's when you get the bad user experience. Like, it needs to be invisible to people. They just need to learn how to interact with the software. So that was the intent with like the end user should never need to understand any of this. In Drupal, module developers have never, like, historically never had any documentation that tells them when to use which patterns. And so, you know, originally it was just everybody has field sets. And so everyone used field sets for everything, and that was fine. And then later we started creating these, which are probably incorrect, like, or not up to date or whatever. As Greg found some of them, I don't even know if they include all of the fancy things that are in Drupal 8 or not. But yeah, we identified this as a problem early on in Backdrop, and that's why we wanted to have this document. I'm just see if I can find the GitHub repository for it. But yeah, I agree. It's important for developers to know about it if we are going to expect them to use it.
But the thing is, what I was trying to say is that with the argument whether that belongs in core or not, we know that developers may not do the right thing, whether they're simply not aware of these guidelines or they do a sloppy work. Why should we, when we can fix the user experience of users, the user experience problem is I have a validation error saying that there's a required field somewhere and I don't see it. And we in core, if developers did a wrong thing, made a bad decision, can fix the user experience so that the user sees that and they're not frustrated starting looking through tabs, right?
Well, we're fixing one bad user experience, but now the experience of them using Backdrop as a whole is worse because on one page they've learned that they don't trust vertical tabs, and on the other page they do. So
I have learned to never trust any control structures anywhere.
Right.
I'm with you, but sorry. Can you elaborate on what is the exact thing that becomes worse, Jen?
The fact that you, like, if you're using a product and over 5 years you've used it or whatever, you've sort of learned how to navigate pages, and you know that you only need to look the stuff above the fold, and now you get to one page where it's now throwing like errors at you that you can't ignore the stuff below the fold. You're not going to trust that on every other page.
Right. Yeah, but it's not something that you can avoid if one of the contrib modules is doing something wrong, right? It's not something that you can avoid. That's my point.
Jen's point is, if you flag that as an error on an UberCart module, now the user thinks, oh, now I have to worry about this for every other module. So now the new user no longer ignores those vertical tabs,
right?
Because one module generated a flag. And so now they think, oh, I have to look at these at all of them. And now you've defeated the purpose of having vertical tabs.
Yeah.
Because the whole purpose was to give them someplace. I mean, again, I've never heard this before either, but I'm hearing the argument and repeating it back.
No, I'm not saying that it has no rationale behind it. What I'm saying is module developers, because it's not just contrib, right? There's custom as well. But as a site owner or as a content editor, when I'm filling a form, if I'm faced with this thing that says, please fix this error, and I don't know where that error is, then that's a user experience problem. And I'm saying, regardless of what developers do, they might make bad decisions, either contrib or custom, right? We can help the end user spot which thing they need to fix. What that causes, I don't think that it's a core problem, because for 80% of the situations, we're not going to be causing any problem by implementing this fix. We're just going to be fixing the use cases where this is actually a problem.
Well,
That's how I see it.
Wouldn't it be a better use of our time to like fix UberCart?
Wouldn't it be a better use of our time to rewrite the forms on 10,000 modules that
Well,
we
it's
need
not
to
10,000 modules.
Yes, it
I
is.
mean, we
because
started
our
with Backdrop. We've already got 2 out of the 10,000 that were for Drupal. So
Fair enough.
I mean,
Yeah. Sorry,
Can
go
I-
ahead, Joseph.
So, first off, this has never been a wrong thing until now.
that's not true.
Secondly,
You just didn't know. You just didn't know. It's been wrong
apparently-
since
Didn't know it was
vertical
wrong.
tabs were created.
apparently me and all 2 million other people who contribute to Drupal.
Yes.
The
That's
second
why
thing,
Drupal's as bad as it is. Yes.
the second
Yes.
thing is that, like, I really think that I'm with Greg here. We should fix this, because if we force people to rewrite their forms in order to be compliant, then that is going to increase the barrier to entry for people moving their stuff from Drupal to Backdrop. And like, I'm not okay with that.
I mean, there's no forcing here, right? Like,
Yeah, we'll just give them broken features instead.
well, they already have broken features in Drupal 7. Like, there's no, like, what we're doing, well, I don't know. In a perfect world, we would be providing them with a document that's like, here's how your user experience is better in Backdrop than Drupal. It's better because we have
Right.
this document that tells people how to build
If-
things, but we don't have it.
I'll mention
We haven't
I'll
had
mention
it for
some
9 years.
I'll mention something
ahead.
similar that we actually fixed, right? Which again, people didn't know about it because it's not well documented enough. We have split the huge help text for publishing options. And out of all the developers that I work with the Form API, very few know that you can actually do individual help text things. So they weren't doing it. We actually fixed it for them, right? It's another thing that wasn't well documented. It existed somewhere as a comment in some documentation, some API form, and whoever was faced with this problem knew about it. But it was very few, like 1 out of 1,000 people knew about it, right? And I think it falls in the same thing, in the same situation, that contrib or people that didn't know about this will make bad decisions without knowing that it's bad decisions until somebody tells them.
I
Like
have an
the
idea.
other,
I want Peter
Alright,
to
cool.
just talk next, but
Yeah.
I have an idea. Go ahead, Peter.
For the record, I'm with Greg and Joseph that I think this idea should go ahead and we should make it better for users, regardless of the developer that built their site. We should
Yeah.
make it easier for users to find stuff that needs fixing on a form. Secondly, the quick skimming of that article that was posted, like the Drupal specifications for this, shows me that it's a recommendation, not a requirement. It sounds like we're trying to make it a requirement. If that's the case, we need to put documentation in Backdrop, not linked to Drupal. And I think you need to open an issue to make it a requirement, because it's currently not. You can do whatever you want in Backdrop. You're not forcing people to put required fields in the main form. If you want to change that, I think you need to open an issue, get feedback, and then put the documentation in place for Backdrop and make a general announcement about it, because that's not the way things work currently. Currently, you can put required fields in hidden places, and I think we should make it so that they're more visible when there's an error.
yeah.
Right.
And back to the thing that I was saying, which is related to what Peter just said, is that what I'm trying to fix is not guide developers into creating good modules. What I'm trying to fix is if developers, because of wrong documentation, because of sloppiness, I don't know what, have made wrong decisions, I'm trying to improve the user experience for the end users that have to deal with these modules. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but
So
I'm not
am-
taking sides, but if you confuse users, you're not improving their experience. And that's
I'm not-
Right. If they're
What's
already
co-
confused, they're already confused. But okay,
Yes,
so
that's what
here I'm definitely getting the feeling that I am the only one on the other side of this fence. So here's a potential compromise. My goal, as you know, having been on the Drupal usability team through all of these studies and watching this and being in the room where they had all these conversations coming with all of these solutions, I probably know a lot more about this than anyone else. And I agree that this is not well documented, even for the Drupal community. But the answer was, I don't know, this is the solution they came up with to make Drupal more user-friendly, and didn't get there. And so when we first started Backdrop, I'm like, we're going to take all of these things that we learned through all of these usability studies that we did in Drupal, and we're going to apply them to Backdrop, and we're going to document everything, and nothing got documented. So here's my recommendation. Everybody wants to fix this problem. Let's fix the problem. However, I think that if we have a required field that fails validation that's in a vertical tab, we could add not even an error, just like a warning to Watchdog that's like, for a better user experience, see how whatever, and link to some page where we do actually document this, and we can explain that, like, you know, if a field is going to be required, someone needs to be able to see it, and either means your vertical tab should be the top vertical tab, or I don't know, some recommendation to someone to figure out how they can make that experience better. And if they don't want to see the Watchdog, or if it's not their module in domain control, but they can safely ignore it. But at least we're then providing module developers with links to documentation on how to build better user interfaces. And we're still solving this problem for all of the users that are stuck with the thing that gave them the error that they can't find on the page. Does that make everyone happy? Okay.
I'll create an issue for that, because I'm solving it now.
I will create the documentation page because that doesn't exist.
All right, I will create an issue to do that, because how I'm dealing with these problems now is I'm modifying the vertical tabs JS. And what you just said, Jen, seems like I need to get into the form API level and check for any nested items within field sets or vertical tabs. And if they're required and they don't have a default value, then throw Watchdog errors.
Yeah, this could be hard, Greg. Maybe don't make it part of that issue. Make it a follow-up.
Yes, it's a separate issue.
Yeah.
Separate issue.
I don't want yours to get blocked. Okay. Yep. And then if you still have your hand up, do you want to say something?
Yeah. So one more thing about the vertical tabs is that they provide features that other control structures do not. So I'm going to continue using them, and I'll write a module to turn off your errors.
I was thinking what that should maybe include a setting, so that if you're a developer and you want to keep breaking your user interface and you don't want to see the errors, you don't have to. So there could be like something in like a config
the vertical tabs provide features that nothing does.
Can you give me an example of what they are? Just like what, big picture. Why do you use vertical tabs?
Hold on, I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Oh, this is the wrong window. Here, there's information. This is not available on field sets, and it is not available on tabs. So you can expose context-tual information and have it basically tell the users what values are set in those collapsed areas.
That's so they can ignore it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I was about to say that.
Yeah.
That's not available on anything else. So, yeah.
Okay.
So I can just look at this and see what all the settings are, and I don't have to click on them because it shows me what they are. Not because they're not important, but because it tells me what they are.
Well, in this case, those are not important. It's because they can be ignored. But I could see how in other places you might want where they are important.
Okay.
I actually use this information on forums, on client sites.
We have lots of usability and accessibility practices that we follow, even though they're not 100%, right? There are exceptions. And so just because we have a general rule that says you shouldn't use vertical tabs, I don't know that anybody's saying that doesn't mean you would never, ever, ever do it.
Yeah, and we can't force anyone to do anything. And this idea of like compliance, that's also not something we really believe in. So just
all right.
Hard words I might have used, I would like to unuse.
The reason why I brought this up, and I wanted some feedback on one thing that I don't have a good idea on how to solve. I need some feedback. So I'll explain the situation real quick. I'll explain what I thought, and then you just tell me yes, no, or go in the issue and say what it is. So here's the use case, which Robert actually gave me the idea for. If there's multiple tabs that fail validation, only one can be highlighted or focused, right? So you give the user a bunch of errors at the top, validation errors. Say some of them refer to actual visible elements that are outside the vertical tabs, and then there may be several within the vertical tabs. The user goes through the form, sees the ones that are outside the vertical tabs, correct these things, and they see the focus tab, so they fix that there. They don't know anything else because we don't indicate anything else, and they hit the submit button again. Now, another error comes up, a validation error. Everything is fixed besides the rest of the tabs. So the person gets into a loop where they need to iterate through the rest of the vertical tabs. And my idea was to highlight those vertical tabs that need attention in red. I can't figure any other solution. Like, see how it's blue now? Make it red or something like that. If you have any better ideas, just please let me know, so that we can indicate all tabs that have all vertical tabs that have issues. That was the goal. And since we've gone beyond the limit, RG Piano is asked for some feedback in Zulip with regards to issue 5499. This is turning into a long meeting. Sorry.
Actually, we started a half hour late, so.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
5499.
Yes. Which has to do with upgrades.
Oh yeah.
So let's see what exactly.
Is Robert still here? Can he?
I
Can you
have a
tell us
question.
what's
So, Robert, when you ran into this, oh yeah, do you want to summarize this for everyone else? And then I have a question for you.
Sure. So there are backdrop modules that require modules that only exist in backdrop. The classic or prototype case being Entity Plus, also Entity UI, and there can be others. And so normally when you upgrade a Drupal site, the upgrade process looks to see if the backdrop modules have all of their required modules enabled. And since Entity Plus didn't exist in Drupal, it's not listed as enabled in the system table. And the upgrader says, okay, I'm going to disable that module because one of its dependencies is missing, and then cascade disabling all of the submodules and so forth. And in the case of my favorite UberCart, which has like 20 submodules, you end up with a whole slew of your modules disabled and therefore not upgraded. And it's very confusing to people. And the solution we came up with for UberCart and rules was to create what we called stub modules, empty Drupal modules of the same name that before you did your upgrade, you turned them on and then ran your upgrade and everything worked beautifully. And what this issue is looking at is saying, let's, in an earlier phase of the catch early enough in the upgrade, look for backdrop only modules that are required and that exist in the code base, that are required by enabled backdrop modules and that exist in the code base. And if they do exist in the code base, we'll assume they were intended to be enabled, and we'll enable them, or we'll mark them as enabled in the system table, so that then the upgrade process can run all the update hooks for those modules and for everything downstream in the dependencies. And that's basically the issue that this is addressing. And the question, I guess, is and I see our Alejandro's here, so maybe you can comment on some of the subtleties and issues that came up as we started digging into this.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have only like a couple minutes before I have to go, but I think that summary was great, Robert. And so the issue is that a lot of modules in Drupal depended on the entity API module. And so the name of that module has changed in Backdrop. That's Entity Plus and Entity. So the idea is that when you are migrating a site to Backdrop and you have like rules, for example, like Robert said, even if you have Entity Plus in the code base, it will not be enabled, and therefore rules will not be enabled, and all other modules that depend on that. So I'm working on enabling those automatically, Entity Plus specifically. In the meantime, I also found that there are a few modules that are required by the standard installation in Backdrop that were not part of the standard install in Drupal. For example, the email and link, those things are standard in Backdrop, and therefore when you're migrating, those will not be enabled. Basically, they will be disabled. And the most serious one was I can't remember what it's called, but it's a module that allows you to install new modules.
Installer module.
Project installer.
Installer module. So that's not going to be enabled by default when you migrate. CK editor is another one. So for some of those modules, there were a contrib module in Drupal 7. If you had that contrib module enabled, like link or email, then that's going to be enabled in Backdrop. But if you're just migrating just a very plain site from Drupal, there's a number of modules that will not be enabled. So the question is, the PR I provided enables those things automatically. But I think maybe Josef or someone else was, Doug Wilmot was suggesting that we should ask the user whether to enable those or not. And I think, Greg, you also said something about that.
I had other concerns, but I think I've changed my mind. I'm not sure if I posted on the comment, because people upgrading from Drupal 7 and keeping the standard installation profile, I'm assuming that they're expecting the features that we advertise to be there.
Right.
What this is doing is the opposite. So I think that we shouldn't ask, but we should inform at the end that, hey, we enabled these modules now. These are new features. So I didn't get a chance to add that to the thread in the issue. I will do that. But yeah, I agree that they should be. I had a change of mind.
Okay.
I
All right.
that too.
I'll be working a little bit this weekend on that PR, and so I'll appreciate if Greg and Robert, if you can take a look and
yes,
give us feedback. I have to go now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for working on this. It's an excellent issue, and it's a real problem.
Sure.
I just want to say I have run into this problem too, and I think this is great. I think, and I haven't done this yet, but I'm just going to throw it out there because I don't know if you guys have tried this yet, that there is some hook that allows you to like change the order in which updates are run. Has anyone tried that? Were you able to get any additional module to install something? I didn't read the whole issue earlier on in order to get that working. No.
The problem is that so I've used that issue in places to stick my update hook earlier than others, but that is still too late in this process
because everything's already disabled.
But yeah, because it's already made a list of all of the updates, and if the module wasn't enabled, it didn't include it.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Yeah. Thank you for working on it. I think for Alejandro, it looked like a very painful problem.
All right. I know we're about to end this, but I have to go. See you guys.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for sticking around and hashing through all of that.
All right. Cool.
Justin, I think, wanted to check in with us on Civi CRM, but we can end the meeting maybe, or should we keep this in the meeting? I'm going to go ahead and stop the meeting. Okay.
Okay.